Okay, so I want to start with a concept from physics, of all places.
Oh,
It's that old paradox.
well,
What happens when an immovable object meets an irresistible force? In the real world, the answer is just a massive release of energy,
yeah.
an explosion.
And in the political world, which is what we saw unfold in D.C., it looks less like an explosion and more like
Right.
a rupture, a clean break.
We are, of course, talking about February 6th, 2026, a date I think is going to be in the history books for a very long time. We've got a pile of breaking reports, transcripts, all this data in front of us about that new video of Donald Trump.
Right.
But before we even get into the clip itself, which, let's be honest, everyone has seen by now, we have a very specific mission for this deep dive.
Yeah, we're not here to just rehash the gossip or do the usual punditry of is this good or bad. We want to look at the mechanics of it all.
Pop the hood,
Exactly. Pop the hood and see why the engine completely seized.
because that's the part that just,
Yeah.
it doesn't add up for me. This is a figure who has been the center of gravity for the Republican Party for a decade, the sun. And then, in what, 4 hours? The whole solar system just flies apart.
Yeah.
How does a decade of what looked like absolute loyalty just evaporate?
It does. It feels incredibly sudden. But when you really dig into these reports, especially the analysis from those frantic meetings on Capitol Hill, you realize this wasn't a sudden death. It was a structural failure.
Okay.
It's a classic case of what you'd call institutional self-preservation finally kicking in.
So let's reconstruct it minute by minute. Because the timeline we have is so precise, it almost reads like a movie script.
It really does. The reporting paints this incredibly vivid picture of that morning, February 6th.
Yeah.
And it starts early, 6:15 a.m. at the Russell Senate office building.
Which, for anyone who hasn't been there, is a ghost town at that hour.
Yeah.
Maybe some cleaning staff, an intern on a coffee run.
Yeah.
That's it.
But not on this morning. Senior aides are arriving. And there's one detail in the initial reports that just sets the whole tone.
What's that?
Phones were collected at the door. Security was spiked.
Wow. Okay, that's the universal sign for the world is about to change. You only take phones when you're terrified of a leak. That's panic mode.
It's containment mode. And you look at who was in that room. This wasn't the B team. It's Mitch McConnell, John Thune, Shelley Moore Capito, the architects of Senate GOP strategy.
So the top brass.
All of them in a secured room. And at exactly 6:52 a.m., they played the video.
All right, I have to play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
We've seen damaging tapes before. Hot mics, controversial rallies.
Mhm.
There's a whole playbook for this.
Right.
You deny, then you say it's out of context, then you blame the media, then you move on. Why didn't that happen here? What made this different?
That is the crucial question, and the reporting is very clear on this. It was the quality of the evidence. This wasn't some shaky cell phone videos, high definition, professionally recorded, timestamped.
This was from that private donor event down in Florida back in January, right?
Correct. And because it was raw, unedited footage, it completely removed what legal analysts call the plausible deniability gap. The content itself, which has been described as, well, explicitly dehumanizing rhetoric about certain groups, wasn't just offensive, it was unambiguous.
Unambiguous, that's the word, isn't it?
It's everything. There's this concept called the ambiguity shield. In politics, you often survive because of ambiguity. If you say something just vague enough.
Your supporters can see what they want to see.
Exactly. They can say, oh, he was joking, or that's not what he meant. Ambiguity lets your allies defend you without looking like they're lying through their teeth.
It's a Rorschach test.
It is. But as the legal analyst Neil Katyal pointed out, this video destroyed the Rorschach test. The HD audio, the clear context, it forced a single objective reality. The ambiguity shield just evaporated. You couldn't spin it.
So, back in that room, the video ends at 7:04 a.m. What's the reaction?
Absolute silence. The reports say you could hear the air conditioning humming, that kind of silence.
That's not a shocked silence. That's a calculating silence. That's the sound of dozens of political careers being weighed in the balance all at once.
And the math came back negative. This is where we get the quote that I think is going down in history. Mitch McConnell breaks the silence and apparently says just 7 words.
Oh, were they?
This is not survivable.
This is not survivable. It's so clinical. It's not, this is wrong or I'm outraged. It's a diagnosis.
It's a triage decision. The patient is dead. Stop CPR. And once he said that, the entire machine shifted gears. By 7:30 a.m., the directive wasn't defend, it was distance.
Every man for himself.
Precisely. And that's why we saw that cascade just an hour later. By 8:45 a.m., the statements started dropping from people who, just the day before were his loudest defenders.
But I'm still stuck on the why. I get that it was HD. I get it was bad. But this is a man who has survived impeachments, indictments, things that would have ended anyone else's career on the spot.
Sure.
Why does this specific video break the camel's back? Did the party suddenly grow conscience overnight?
No. And that's the cynical but really important part of this whole thing. You have to look at the party itself. This brings us to Norman Ornstein's analysis of what he calls institutional fatigue.
Institutional fatigue. Sounds like a medical condition.
In a political sense, it is. The reporting shows that internally, the GOP was already teetering. They had memos about donor panic, big money closing their checkbooks. They had polling data showing this persistent erosion in the suburbs that they just couldn't fix.
So the foundation was already cracked.
The bridge was already rusted through. This video wasn't the bomb, it was just the heavy truck that finally made it collapse. Ornstein argues this wasn't some moral epiphany.
Right.
It was a strategic retreat. The cost of loyalty, finally and dramatically, exceeded the benefit of loyalty.
That economic framing makes perfect sense. It was a cost-benefit analysis. For years, the benefit of his base outweighed the baggage. And on February 6th, the baggage just got too heavy.
And that explains the speed. You mentioned Watergate earlier.
Yeah, that took months.
Yeah.
Drip, drip, drip of information.
Exactly. Nixon's support eroded over a year. This happened in one news cycle. Conservative columnist David French made a great point that this speed is actually a sign of how brittle that loyalty really was. It looks strong, but it was hollow.
It's fascinating to see the consensus form, too. You have commentators from the left, the right, the center,
Mm-hmm.
all basically watching the same thing and nodding their heads. We haven't had that kind of shared reality in a long time.
It's a rare convergence. When ideology, morality, and cold, hard electoral math all point in the same direction, you get a rupture.
So let's broaden this out. We're calling it a political earthquake. But looking through these sources, there are parallels to other kinds of collapses. The one that jumped out at me was the comparison to ICO cases.
Yeah, the organized crime analogy, it sounds harsh, but if you look at it just from a structural perspective, the dynamics are, well, they're identical.
Walk me through that. How was the Senate on that morning like our ICO case?
Well, in any organized crime structure, loyalty is held together by two things: fear of punishment and the promise of protection. Everyone holds the line because if they stick together, the whole thing works.
Omerta, the code of silence.
Exactly. But the second a key player flips, or the moment the boss creates a mess so big he can no longer protect you, the entire calculus inverts.
Suddenly, staying loyal is the most dangerous thing you can do.
Because you're the one left holding the bag. So what do? You rush for the exit. You try to cut a deal. The isolation is instant. You go from we're a family to I barely knew the guy in a heartbeat. That's what we saw happen at 8:45 a.m.
The protection racket failed. And the other parallel was Enron. That feels like a throwback.
But it's so relevant. Remember, Enron was a political powerhouse. They had everyone in their pocket. But once the financial losses became undeniable, those political friends didn't just drift away. They sprinted.
Nobody wants to be seen standing next to a sinking ship.
Especially a radioactive one. And that brings us to the next layer of this whole thing. We've talked about the politics, but we really need to talk about the money.
The sources use the phrase bleeding assets.
And they are. We're talking about the real estate portfolio. Trump Tower, Mar-a-Lago. These are assets valued in the hundreds of millions. Trump Tower is around 500 million, Mar-a-Lago maybe 200.
But those are physical buildings. A video doesn't make a skyscraper disappear. How does a political scandal actually change the price of concrete and steel?
It changes your leverage. This is where we get into the nitty-gritty of high finance. The sources are all talking about the risk of forced liquidation.
Forced liquidation, so the banks get involved.
Here's how it works. Big commercial loans have these things called covenants, clauses in the contract. Some are called material adverse change clauses. The bank is basically saying, we're lending you money based on your reputation, which we consider part of the collateral.
So if the brand reputation craters,
The bank can argue the underlying asset isn't secure anymore. They can call the loan.
just pay us back now.
Or demand more collateral. Give us $50 million in cash to cover our new risk. And if you don't have that cash lying around, you have to sell the asset. And if you're selling a $500 million building because you have to and the whole world knows it.
The vulture circle.
Yeah.
You get pennies on the dollar.
Estimates suggest you could see these assets moving at 60, maybe 70% of their actual value. We are talking about potential losses of over $400 million in net worth. Just gone.
And the brand itself. The Trump brand always stood for a certain kind of luxury and power. Even if you despised the politics, you knew the brand meant gold-plated.
And now it signals instability. Toxicity. Lenders are reassessing their exposure. International partners are hitting pause. The expert consensus here is that the perception of instability is rapidly becoming a self-fulfilling financial reality.
It's like a run on the bank, but the bank is a person.
Precisely. Once the smell of blood is in the water, the market is brutally efficient.
So we have the political rupture, the financial hemorrhage, but there's a third leg on this stool, and it might be the most dangerous, the legal escalation.
This is where it shifts from just a scandal to a massive liability. We're not just talking about losing an election or money, we're talking about potential criminal exposure.
The sources mentioned Preet Parra, former U.S. attorney. He's usually pretty careful. What's his take?
Ferraro's point is that the line between political embarrassment and actual legal liability is shrinking incredibly fast. The analysis points to potential civil rights violations from the video's content, but also, and this is key, obstruction.
Obstruction. How do you get from a video to obstruction?
It all depends on what was said about the video or the events in it before it leaked. If there were sworn depositions denying this kind of conduct, if there was an effort to conceal evidence.
Ah, I see. So if the video flatly contradicts testimony you gave 3 months ago, you just walked right into a perjury trap.
You've got it. The old saying, the cover-up is worse than the crime, is basically federal prosecution 101. But the bigger shift is psychological. When a figure loses that immovable object status, when their political shield drops, prosecutors get much, much bolder.
The armor is gone.
The armor is gone. And that turns this into a legal cascade. You have civil suits, criminal probes, regulatory inquiries, all descending on a target that is suddenly completely undefended. The Department of Justice no longer has to worry about a Senate firewall because the Senate just burned it to the ground themselves.
It really feels like watching history in, fast forward, a modern political party surgically removing its central figure in near real time. It's brutal, efficient, and totally unprecedented.
We have never seen a party apparatus dismantle its loyalty to a leader that dominant in less than 4 hours. It's going to be a case study for decades.
So let's zoom out. When the dust settles, what's the lesson here? What's the takeaway beyond just the shock of it all?
I think it fundamentally redefines how we understand political loyalty. For a long time, the assumption was if you have the base, you own the party, that the leader is the institution.
But this proves the institution is its own entity. And it fights back.
It proves there's a breaking point. It proves that survival, electoral, financial, personal survival is the ultimate currency. And when the cost of loyalty outweighs the benefit, the system corrects itself with ruthless speed.
It really leaves me with a provocative thought, something for you all to chew on. If a party can do this, if it can flip a switch from total loyalty to you're on your own in 180 minutes, how much power do any of these so-called great men of history actually hold?
That's the question, isn't it? We obsess over the personalities, the people giving the speeches, but maybe the real power is always in the machinery behind the curtain. The donors, the pollsters, the quiet meetings in the Russell Senate office building at 6:15 in the morning.
The machine is always there, just waiting for the math to change.
Waiting for the liability to outweigh the asset. And when it does, the machine always wins.
Well, if there's one thing we've learned, it's that things can stay the same for a very, very long time, and then change all at once.
Absolutely.
We'll be tracking this as it develops. The aftershocks from this are going to be felt for years. But for now, we'll leave you with this. History doesn't repeat itself, but as we saw on February 6th, it often rhymes with ruthless consistency. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
Take care.